Hi Danny and Ryan, so here we go to a little screencast about how the Yext API can be engaged by your web apps. Let's go here to yesterday's session. This is an example of an API call. Ideally, the API keys are secret, so they should not be disclosed, which means that I wrote the proxy to encode the URL without specifying what the values of API key and account ID are. So these substrings will be filled by the proxy. We have an example here. There it is. So I didn't define the callback, so callback shows up here as the default attribute. If you give a value to callback, that will be the value of the callback function after the JSON object comes back. Okay, so let's go to the app. The idea is that, actually, I should demonstrate this so you believe me. So let's go to another. Oh, there it is. So if I say callback equals to lala, request failed for some reason. Let's try again. And callback equals to lala. There it is. Okay, lala. And now the JSON object is passed back as the input argument of the function whose name you control. So this is called JSON with padding, or JSON-P. So the proxy I wrote will use the JSON-P mechanism to get around the same domain origination restriction of the Yext API. So quick summary, the proxy is doing two things. It's getting around the same domain origination restriction, and it's filling the account ID and API key for you. So after you encode, for example, this API call, you can retrieve it as a callback function with the name of your choosing. So here's an example now. You have the code here. So I encourage you to go through the JavaScript script that is called from the HTML. So you'll see here that it starts by playing that silly little addition example, just so you see that DOM elements and JavaScript, they can be used together, and you can assign functions to event listeners of the DOM elements. And you have here the rest. So if the division exists, you do something. If it doesn't exist, it doesn't cause an error. Back to the app, I'm going to open the developer tools. So the silly addition is here. And once you understand that line of code, you can move to the other one. So if you click on demo, you have the same example of an API call. You can write your own, of course. If I call it, I get the JSON object that is passed back as the input argument of the callback function. There it is, to be this X. So if I do this again, call, I'm in the right file, I'm blocking it. There we are. Okay. So this is a good example. If you're not in the right file and you're trying to debug it, even if it appears to be the right file or the right name, you won't be scoping the right code. So let's look at X. So let me see. This is the input argument of the callback function, which is the JSON object that you're trying to get back. So if I let this continue, now the JSON response, see here, that it's the ID of this element here will be filled by the stringified version of the JSON object. And there it is. All right. So once again, go over the code. Tell me if there is anything you don't understand. The idea is that you would be able to use either my code or code of the same nature written by you to make calls to this proxy and pass any encoded API call to the Yext service. If you change anything in the beginning of the call, so remember the conversation that we don't want to provide this as a general purpose proxy service for other services. If you change anything here in the beginning, for instance, if you remove the SSL, you'll get an error. Oops. Let's remove the debug point. Let's continue. There it is. So this is not an acceptable one. If you make the changes somewhere else, so it's working, but let's say you change the domain name for some reason, you make the call, you get an error. If you don't provide anything, of course you get an error because the URL cannot be dereferenced, it doesn't exist at all. Alright, so go over the code, write your own apps, and let me know if there's anything you don't understand about the way I made this proxying code. Alright, bye now.